Hello and welcome back to the Schmuseum. Now, as I said last time, when we took a look at some of the costs of my McLaren 675 LT Spider over the 5 years that I've now owned it, here on the Schmuseum channel, I want to bring you a bit more behind the scenes on the garage, on the collection, on some of the ownership elements that you might not know all that much about, as well, of course, as the vlogs, the build process, and everything that's going to be happening. And today, I want to be focusing on the McLaren Senna, and in particular, run you through some of the options and the specification. Now, I was lucky to be the first owner of this car. I bought it prior to it being released. I put my name down, I paid my deposit, and I got to spec it from new, from McLaren, at the factory in Woking. And there are some options which are a bit of a surprise at both ends of the spectrum. And today I'd like to run you through some of the different costs of all of the different options that I went for on this car and see what you think about them, although I might save probably the most surprisingly expensive option and the most surprisingly affordable option relatively until the end. But we'll have a run through then of the McLaren Senna, have a quick walk around the car. Obviously, Ultimate Series, only 500 cars, 800 horsepower, 800 kilos of downforce, 800 Newton meters, just under 1,200 kilos in its latest configuration. And I'd like to get some scales because it'd be really fascinating actually to weigh some of the Schmemobiles. So maybe that's something we'll need to do in the future as well and see how they stack up versus their claimed figures from manufacturers. That's always something that's quite interesting to see. This particular car, obviously, is focused completely for the racetrack, and I've gone for my slightly unusual color scheme. It's quite a soft, almost feminine style, we could say. The blue, it's very gentle, it's not got any painted livery over the top, it's not completely wild, and I like that mix. And it was really bringing my former 675 LT Coupe back to life with this car, effectively with a long-term plan. And it's sitting here now in race mode. As you step back and you see how it sits right down towards the ground, obviously the tyres tucking up in towards the arches, the front splitter just off the concrete. It looks mega, and having experienced it in anger at Spa-Francorchamps with pure McLaren and at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, there's not really all that much out there that offers what this offers. And of course, prices of these things have softened since new. It would be nice if they had gone the other way, but at 3 years old, to be honest, it's not all that mad. Senna's sit in the 600,000, 700,000 pound bracket at the moment for a nicely spec'd car, so down about 25% over about 3 years now. It's crazy to think that I took delivery 3 years ago, and this was about halfway through the build run. My car is number 281 of the 500. It was a number that was randomly assigned. I'm not too bothered with trying to have the same number on every car in the collection, which would be an absolute nightmare to try and achieve and make everything match up. So this is 281. They were built roughly in number order. I'd paid a deposit before it was revealed when it was codenamed P15, paid a second deposit when I locked in my spec, and then, or when the allocation was effectively confirmed, and then it came to locking in the spec. Now the color is of course very famous, the MSO cerulean blue. Often with manufacturers, paint colors can be a ludicrously expensive option, given that you might think on the face of it that all it is a different paint color loaded in the gun. But when you start going off menu with things like paint colors, you end up with getting spray outs, going through the different processes, and that's what the cost involves. It's not the cost of doing it in a different color, it's the cost of going through the bespoke parts of the process. So on this car, it's actually not that crazy. To be able to do it in MSO cerulean blue, yes, a color from their existing palette, was an extra £13,500. Now, I've paid more than that for paints on less expensive cars than this before. So that's not crazy. And to be honest, I should actually rewind back a step and talk about the price of the car. Here in the UK, the McLaren Senna was £748,185. Add on the £1,815 for the annual road tax and an exact flat £750,000 list price. That's where it started, £600,000 plus tax. A little bit more than we had thought prior to reveal, but that's obviously where the options started with things like the paint. Now, there were actually, amusingly, only 4 standard menu options that you could even choose for this car in the first place. I'm gonna have to get out my phone to have a little run through and talk you through these, but the 4 options you could choose from were effectively 2 bits of glass. So up on the roof of the car, you've got these glass panels on the top of the doors, which feel awesome when you're inside it, but that was an option. So the upper glass was £2,220. It's Gorilla Glass, it's toughened. I don't think that's too crazy. Then another bit of glass on the doors, the lower section of the doors, those famous side windows, which really made the Senna very distinct. Those door glasses were £3,460. So it's okay, it's not too crazy. Another bit of glass, as it happens, was actually a separate option, I think a no-cost option, to have the bulkhead glass where you can see through from the main cabin in towards the engine bay, but quite hard to show you. That was no cost. We've got the Bowers & Wilkins stereo system, so a lightweight sound system, weighs just a couple of kilos, but puts some speakers just inside the windows and inside. We'll have a look at that in a moment. That was £5,500. And the other thing, if we come towards the very back to show you on the bumper, are the cameras, all part of the track telemetry system. We've got one here, one inside the car, and one on the front bumper as well. The track telemetry cameras with all of the associated data, software on the system, and it records your track times. It's really very clever. That was £3,480. So that's not too crazy again. You'd probably pay about the same on a car, a third of this price for a track telemetry option. So to be fair with those, with the standard menu option items, I think McLaren were actually very reasonable. But this is where we continue to MSO. And with MSO, McLaren Special Operations, you name it, and they'll do it. Things like tinted carbon, carbon roof scoop, custom caliper colors, custom stitching inside, and many more. So we've had the paint. One other thing, if we come around to the wheels, if you look down here on the wheels, I was able to have the center lock surrounds anodized in the same cerulean blue. Now, I think that is a lovely touch. I really, really like how those have turned out. Obviously, we've got the center lock lightweight wheels. That wasn't too, maybe I say that wrongly. To do those 4 in my custom color, remember this isn't a standard color, was £2,500. I think it's worth it visually. It looks really very, very nice. What else do we have? Window tint. This one I think is quite at the expensive end for what it is, but to have window tint on the door glass, the piano black tint here, and also on the roof glass, so 4 tinted windows, direct from factory, was £1,251. That's probably more than it would cost aftermarket by a couple of times, but it rolled out of the factory like that. I was able to collect it looking visually as it's going to end up. Now we get to a lot of exterior carbon fibre. You've got a lot of standard carbon with this car. For example, the sills are carbon, the mirror caps are carbon, this whole nose bridge section is carbon, the splitter is carbon, the front light surrounds are carbon. Even this, by the way, the number plate plinth, even that's carbon fibre, which I really quite like. You can actually detach this. It's screwed on at the back, but when you get to the racetrack, you can unscrew it, and it's held in place with magnets as well. It's obviously fully fixed at the moment, but you can take it off and then you get better airflow through some of the vents and openings that you have at the front. But beyond all of that carbon, I have a few more bits of carbon. For example, right down in here, if you can see, we have 2 aero blades. They're closed up at the moment, but one here and one just up there. Those would normally be painted, but they're on this car in visual carbon fibre, and to do that was £3,000. I actually think that's pretty reasonable value, considering that's, you know, mechanical parts moving around inside the car. We also have the roof snorkel. This would normally be gloss black, actually, to match with the surrounding glass areas. To do the roof snorkel in carbon fibre, a little bit more, but it is quite a big piece as well. That was £5,500. I think that's okay, to be honest. We also have the end plates. Again, these would normally have been painted, and quite a few customers have done some graphics or their car numbers or things like that on the end plates. Those for the pair were £3,000. Again, I don't think that's too mad, to be honest. One other thing in carbon fibre is to have done the key. I've got both of my keys with the blue carbon style finish, and that was £1,500 as well. I like having keys in colours or something that links to the car. I just feel like it gives you that extra touch out of it. Now, if we come to the interior, we have a host of different options inside the car to show you as well. Pop open the door, these lovely, very dramatic doors. And the first thing that I'm going to point out here, actually, are these, the carbon fibre sills. Now normally this entire piece would actually be carpet. This whole thing would be carpet. You wouldn't have the McLaren logo on it either. So these are actually two options. The full carbon panels for both sides, £4,500. Quite a lot of money, but you see it every single time you step into the car. I think that's a really nice option. To paint the cerulean blue McLaren logo on the side was an additional £1,600. Probably quite a lot for a blue logo, but it's another nice flash of colour. And when you take photos of the car with the door up, or when you're standing back from it, you see that very clearly. So I really quite like it as well. Another cool touch are the blue gas struts. This is one of the defining features, I think, of the Senna, to have these exposed gas struts for the doors, and you could obviously paint this as well in your own choice of colour. So I did them in the MSO cerulean blue. That was actually only £1,251, which again I think is fairly reasonable considering what it is, how prominent it is, and how much time you actually spend seeing those. Now, one option that I think was really very expensive, I'm not going to lie, the steering wheel. If you have a look at the steering wheel, normally it would be full Alcantara. In this car, I've added the carbon fibre around the bottom sections, across the top as well, and had the painted 12 o'clock stripe. And this is probably one of the options that I think was overkill, but it is quite nice. This was £5,267 to change from an Alcantara wheel to one with carbon fibre and a painted 12 o'clock stripe. That's a little bit crazy, but actually it's because they have to give you an entirely new wheel in the process at the factory. The original wheel that's on the car gets taken off. I don't know what they do with it afterwards, and they make you a new one a little bit later on. So it's big, but I guess it's all part and parcel of the package. Then if you have a closer look inside the car, the stitching that you can see around the seats, for example, the headrest embroidery around the edge and around all of the seat pads in these very, very light carbon fibre buckets. They are extraordinarily light. To do that in my own choice of contrast stitch in the cerulean blue, that was £2,667 in total. I think that's okay, to be honest. It obviously covers a lot of the interior of the car and carries that blue theme inside there as well. And one other thing, behind the seats, we also have the racing harnesses. They're currently tucked away, not being used. We can drive it with the regular 3 points, and then in the center between your legs we also have the 6-point harness bracket that folds up just here. So the harnesses were also an option, obviously, for track driving, and that came in at a total of £2,750. So another, I guess, fairly big thing. But there are two options that I think stand out, one in a good way, one in a bad way, and we should decide which to start with right now. I think probably the surprisingly affordable option on the McLaren Senna, which was that as you look at this car and you look around it, all of the exposed carbon fibre is tinted navy blue. Everything. The dual layers of the wing, the uprights, the roof snorkel, all of the aero work that you have here, the intricacies of the diffuser and the bumper. Around the side, you've got the side skirts, you've got the mirror caps. All of the carbon fibre on this car, tinted blue, is something you might have thought would be £50,000. I don't know, 50,000, 40,000, 30,000, even 25,000. You would be wrong. All of that as an option to tint blue, everything, 13,333. And that actually feels like a bit of a bargain. Cheaper to do all of the tinted carbon than to do my previous colour that I'd had on a McLaren before, which I think is quite interesting. So that feels like a relative bargain, to be honest, on a car like this. The one, however, which is, I'm going to say, a little bit painful, I had requested something to be done on the Senna prior to getting the options in terms of what I desired as my specification, and I'd basically been told it's not possible. So I'd pushed a little bit and again been told it's not possible, until in the days I was locking the spec, I got a phone call saying, we can do it, it's going to cost a lot, and you have to decide today. And that was to paint the calipers silver. Now you might be thinking, why is this such an expensive option? The answer is because of the very fancy racing brakes. It gets incredibly hot, and that means that the paint in here has to have a very high level of heat resistance, and the normal paints that they use aren't good enough. So they had to develop a paint to make the calipers silver to obviously meet the warranty criteria going forwards and to not have any defects with them. And as a result of that, for myself and a couple of others that all asked if we could do silver calipers, the price, yes, I'm laughing a little bit, was £8,500 to do those silver. About the same as 8 Renault Clios to paint my calipers silver. That was by far and away the maddest option to me, but it was one of those, I had requested it, I had the silver calipers, or I had the polished calipers actually back on my 675 LT Coupe at the time, and I wanted to bring that in against the stealth grey that we have on the wheels, and to obviously line up as well with the blue centre lock. So that was a big option, but it was one that I think adds this extra degree just visually to the car, and it's all these small details. If you look at them like this, as we've talked through it, you can easily think that on its own is too much, or maybe that's a good deal, but then you get to this whole package and you look at the car as it's sitting right here, and it's, I think when you spec a car, it's all about the finished result. It's about how it all comes together. And obviously with the different Schmemobiles, the Ford GT, for example, doing the bespoke painted stripes on it, it's about the unique element as well, and that's what's always made it so special for me. So this is why I put it together as I did, and the total on the road, delivery price, taxes paid for this McLaren Senna was £834,779. I know the number exactly, I will remember it well. It is by far the most I've ever spent on a car. It terrifies me, but every driving experience is so mental and so involving and so dramatic that every time I get in this car, I appreciate how special it is. And yes, I've teased and thought maybe I could sell it one day and buy a P1, but that would never work for me. I had this from new, I spec'd this, I picked it up at the factory, I did the first miles in it, I know the full story of it, and yes, as you guys will know, it had a little incident with some of the panels that we actually still have here in the garage, and I'll keep them as well. It's all part of the story. So to me, the car is worth so much more than its market value, we could say, you know, whatever the price on these kind of things actually is. If you'd owned any normal car for 3 years, it'd be verging on about half what it cost new. So relatively speaking, it's actually done quite well from that perspective. And it's a car I intend to own for a very, very, very long time. I don't see this going anywhere anytime soon. But I think it's quite interesting to get a feel for what some of these options prices cost, because they're not often talked about. Obviously, cars have their list price. Sometimes cars like the GT Black Series have a fully spec'd price. And certainly here in the UK, you couldn't save any money by taking off any options. It came as it came. But it's quite interesting to go through that process. And of course, I've done it, or I'm doing it with the SF90 at the moment. I've done it recently with the Hurricane STO. And it's also really interesting to see how the different manufacturers stack up. And maybe we can talk a bit more about that at some point, as well as to even just paint prices. Who charges how much for what? Because some of them might surprise you. So I think for me, things like the tinted blue carbon, absolute bargain. Most of the options, pretty reasonable. Calipers, horrendously expensive. Some silly things that come in more than they should, perhaps window tinting and that kind of thing. But overall, you know, to make a car like this, to do it this special, that's pretty much the way you want to go about it. If you go shorter on the options and you just have a black car, it will never really stand out. It will never be all that unique and all that bespoke, even if, as I've just worked out, the options on this actually cost more as options than that costs as a car, or the M3 for that. That's kind of crazy to think about. That whole car, and the new Lotus Emira, now that they've announced the pricing as well. The Lotus Emira, fully spec'd first edition, V6 manual with everything, is 10 grand less than the options on that. I'm mad sometimes, absolutely mad. But hey, this is passion, right? This is what I love, driving and enjoying and getting to own these cars and getting to share them with you guys. So I feel very, very lucky to be in this position. I think it's very interesting to be able to share more of this with you. So we've had a run through of the costs of the 675 LT Spider, the full story of the Ford GT and the ownership experience with that, and now we've gone through some of the options as well on the McLaren Senna. But if there is anything else with the Schmemobiles you'd like to know about, do let me know. For now though, that's all from here today at the Schmuseum. Until next time.